Travel journalist and author Emma Gregg is with us at the Stanfords Travel Writers Festival now as she talks with Julia Wheeler.
Hello, and let me add my very warm welcome to the Stanfords Travel Writers Festival in this most tortuous year for travel. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being on the journey with us. It has been torture reading your wonderful book, Emma, because it's just so full of inspiration and ideas and the how-to. And flicking through it, I was thinking, I just want to go, but of course we can't. But having said that, of course, I have all sorts of plans, and that's really why it's so timely, isn't it?
For people like me, it's time, as you say, to think laterally. For people that have an interest in making their trip as green as possible, and thinking about travelling less and considering alternative modes of transport which are less harmful, less polluting, is definitely a way forward. And the great news is that it's achievable. You know, it's much easier than people, I think, imagine. It just takes a little bit of thinking, and that can actually be part of the fun of it.
So let's tackle those obstacles, if you like. Obstacles in real life, often obstacles in our mind. And I would say that the top two, I wonder if you'd agree, are time and cost. So talk us through how we might overcome thinking in that mindset.
Yeah, no, that's a really tricky one, and it's partly, I'm afraid, to start on a blaming note. It's partly the aviation industry's fault, insofar as flying has been so cheap for us for so long that we've got into a way of imagining that it's okay and it's our right to be able to travel for very little money. So this unfortunately is probably going to have to change over the coming years. But in the meantime, if we don't have the funds available for a really big investment in a trip that, for example, a long distance journey by train or by ship might involve, the answer is to think a little bit differently about destinations. Maybe think more carefully about destinations which are close to home, reassess them, and I think it's become easier perhaps for many people to do this in this crazy period, because so many of us have been forced to stay close to home, and many of us have discovered that there are some fabulous places not all that far from us, and there are new ways of experiencing them, different ways of experiencing them. We can see them with fresh eyes and really appreciate the beauty and interest that we have around us, and that of course is inherently green. So staying close to home is one way of saving a little bit of money. We can do some really brilliant things in a short space of time, and there are some destinations which are way out of our immediate orbit. For us in Britain, we can get outside Europe in a far shorter time than you might imagine. It's a matter of learning really about the possibilities. There are ways, for example, to get yourself all the way to Morocco by train and ferry in the space of 2 days flat, if you really go for it. So I think just considering possibilities like that can open people's eyes a little to what they can do in the time that they have available. But of course, the most exciting journeys perhaps that one can do without flying are those that demand many weeks, possibly even months. So those are naturally always going to be opportunities for the privileged or those that are lucky enough to have the chance to take a few months off or a few years even. But again, the way we're working is evolving, and more people are discovering that they are able to live a nomadic life, have laptop will travel kind of thing, and that can be an extraordinary way to experience the world and to learn about how life is in different parts of the world in as green a way as possible.
Paris is it is the nearest place, isn't it, really, that we think of in terms of a city break, the nearest and really the easiest perhaps to get to. And you say in the book that the trick to enjoying Paris, or one of the tricks, is to live like a local.
Yes, I mean, you're so right. It's so easy to get to Paris without flying, isn't it? We just need to hop on the train or on a ferry or whatever. It's just, it's much easier to travel there without flying than if you do fly, in many ways. And once you're there, living like a local, well, I've been interested in responsible tourism for quite some time, and living like a local, it's one of those sort of jargon things that responsible tourism gurus love to throw around. And sometimes it's a little bit hot airish, but in Paris, it really is a thing. Insofar as if you choose to travel to Paris off season, so as you know, and during the high season of summer, an awful lot of Parisians just aren't there. They've cleared out on holiday. But if you choose to visit Paris in the autumn or winter or spring, and if you choose to stay in a residential district rather than a more obvious central tourism focused district, then you can really get a sense for how it is to be a Parisian. You can hang out in the kind of places where Parisians walk and eat and meet and shop, and to really heighten the experience, you could choose to stay in a homestay. One of the very first times that I stayed in a homestay was in Paris, and it was long before the invention of homestay apps and websites and the likes. I found an opportunity through a directory, I think. But staying in a family's spare room and just hanging out with them over evening meals and in between me going out and exploring, using the best of my French that I could gather from my old schoolgirl French, was one of the most enjoyable times I've had ever in a city, and I highly recommend that sort of experience.
You mentioned earlier Morocco, and that being sort of is an exotic destination, but one again that is perhaps more is easier to reach. And I have to say, I've got form here, because the first university summer holiday, I worked for 2 months in order to spend the third month interrailing, and it was to Morocco that we headed. I have to say, partly because that was the furthest we could get on an interrail ticket, and it felt like a bargain, rather than anything more cultural, perhaps. But still a time that I remember very well. So take us perhaps to Marrakesh, to Casablanca. What sorts of things would you do there, and will we find there?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I picked Morocco for the book, because a lot of people, their first experience of it, just like you, is getting there by train, and how exciting that you can get yourself all the way down through France and through Spain, and just hop on a ferry and boom, you're in Africa. I think that's an extraordinary thing, and of course things have moved on a little in Morocco as well. Overland transport wise, insofar as it's got a bullet train now. So, I mean, you can get around Morocco and string several cities together really quickly. You can get very easily from Tangier down to Casablanca. From Casablanca, you can continue to Marrakesh, not on a bullet train yet, but that is going to come in due course. Morocco's invested an enormous amount of money in this, which is kind of controversial, but from our point of view as travellers, it's a real boon. If you've got the time and visit several cities, then comparing the different atmosphere between each one, between say Tangier and Casablanca and Marrakesh, and for that matter Fez and Rabat, is fascinating. Hiring local guides each time is a particularly great thing to do, because the Moroccan guys just love to show you the very best of your city, and they also help make the experience manageable. Some people find Moroccan cities a little bit overwhelming, particularly if they're not familiar with North African culture. They feel very different as a tourist to the locals, and that can be a little bit unsettling. So having a really good guide to interpret and to decode and to just put you at your ease is a really brilliant way to experience things like crazy markets and beautiful food and drinking mint tea and all those wonderful things that Morocco can deliver. Plus, of course, you can then, having done with your fabulous cities, you can then get out and explore some of the most amazing hiking country. If you head down to the Atlas Mountains, that's just superb. All that can be done without flying. You just need the time and a little bit of imagination to put your own itinerary together, or as I say, find really good guides to help you.
You mentioned the bullet train. I'm going to slow it down now, and let's talk about some slower ways of taking in the landscape and the people and the places. The Camino way. It's obviously it's a pilgrimage. It's a Christian pilgrimage. I mean, in your experience, are most of the people who do it doing it for Christian values and as part of that, or actually are there lots of people who want to join those throngs for different reasons?
Well, a lot of people are Christians, and in particular Catholics, and that's natural. I mean, that's the heart of the Camino. If we're talking about the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, so it goes to a Catholic shrine, and that part of the world is dotted with beautiful churches, and it is a Christian pilgrimage. However, there are quite a few people that choose to do a pilgrimage for different reasons. It could be because they're motivated by a spiritual journey of a different sort within themselves. So they could perhaps just decide that they'd like to set some time aside to contemplate something in their own life history, which just needs a little bit of time and space. Or they could be doing it simply for the challenge of it, because it is a physical challenge, and that in itself is motivation for many people. And others do it just because they like the idea of the experience of the people that they might meet along the way, which includes both pilgrims and also hosts, because when you're a Camino pilgrim, a big thing is the experience of staying with local families along the way and meeting people in the villages along the way. So yeah, there are lots of different reasons to join the Camino.
Let's jump on two wheels. And in the book, you have a section about Denmark to Belgium along a European cycling route, which I have to say did sound possible, simply because it sounds quite flat.
The stretches of coastline between Denmark and Belgium are really doable. They're flat and the infrastructure is great. So I think most people know that about that part of the world. But what many people perhaps don't fully appreciate is how wild some of that coastline is. And of course, there are big cities in that part of the world, but there are also big wilderness areas, like beautiful islands, tidal reaches, amazing bird watching. There are loads of overwintering water birds which flood into that area, and in the summer there's lots of bird life too. So as a place to really appreciate big skies and long views, like wonderful fresh air and lovely landscapes, it really delivers. And there are lots of great long cycle routes in Europe, but I think that's one of the most, as you say, the most feasible and accessible and interesting, surprisingly interesting parts of the world to go on a multi-day cycle route.
You mentioned those different routes, and that actually is part of a Eurovello route that's much bigger. Tell us about that sort of what was a circular route, wasn't it?
Yeah, it used to be in this massive circle which took you all the way to the north of England with a ferry crossing to close the loop. Sadly, that ferry crossing is no more, and hopefully, fingers crossed, in due course, as interest in traveling without flying grows, some of those old ferry routes which have been closed down over the years will resume, in the same way that hopefully more of the night train routes will resume. We've already seen a bit of a resurgence in night trains in Europe, focused around Austria. Other parts of Europe too are seeing an increase in their night train services. So yeah, ferries too. Hopefully in due course we'll have more ferries again. But for now, yes, this particular cycle route, it's kind of a horseshoe shape rather than a circle. Sadly, yeah. But it's still the section that you can still do is still extremely worthwhile.
The other one that jumped out at me actually was the Iron Curtain route, which sounds fantastic as well. But let's move west from there and go to Italy. And you specifically say about electric bikes. Now, Emma, are electric bikes cheating?
Yeah, well, it all depends, doesn't it? I love the idea that you can get around somewhere hilly on a bike without ending up so exhausted that you have to stuff your face with pasta at the end of every single day. Not that there's anything wrong in that, really. So much the better. There are some organised trips run by tour companies that specialise in cycling tours. Some of those are offering e-biking tours now, which is fantastic. It makes cycling a lot more accessible to a lot more people, and that's got to be a good thing.
I guess the advantage of those organised tours is, one, that you've got somebody to follow, or certainly a sort of daily itinerary and route mapped out for you. But also it means that you don't necessarily have to carry your luggage either on your back or in panniers on your side, because people who are organising the tour will take that to your next destination.
Yeah, no, I so agree. I think these kind of tours are just excellent. And again, I mean, they just make landscapes much more accessible to more people. The idea of not having to lug your stuff around is fabulous. And it also means that you have a wider choice of places to stay as well this way, because your support team can take you to some beautiful village or some beautiful out of the way country house hotel, which you wouldn't necessarily have the time in the day to get to with your bike. So if you leave your bike in the place where they store the bikes overnight, and then you hop onto their minibus or whatever it may be, and go to this beautiful overnight spot, that can really make your trip that much more enjoyable for those that are looking for something in which, I don't know, a little bit of luxury doesn't go amiss from time to time, does it? I think a cycling for softies kind of trip can be a real treat that we can all deserve from time to time.
Absolutely. And 3 or 4 hours on a bike a day absolutely grants you that luxury in the evening, I always think. Let's go a bit to Toad Hall now, and talk about caravans in County Wicklow, because this was something I had never thought of, partly because I'm not a horsey person, but you don't have to be a horsey person, do you?
No, you don't. And I hadn't thought of this either, so I was really intrigued to find out about this. So, County Wicklow, that part of Ireland is so easy to get to from the UK without flying, because you just need to hop on a ferry from Wales, and boom, there you are. Really easy, straightforward, assuming that you've got sea legs. I have to put a caveat in here because it is a bit of a rough stretch of sea, but if you're lucky with the weather, or you've got legs for that kind of thing, crossing from Wales to Ireland is straightforward. Once you're in Ireland, getting down to Wicklow is also straightforward. And there's this charming thing that you could do while you're there, which is to hire yourself a gypsy caravan with a horse and go pootling about along country lanes with said caravan and horse. Now, as you said, you don't need to be an adept horse wrangler to do this at all. The people who run these trips, who own the farms, are very good at explaining exactly what you have to do to keep yourself fit and healthy, and your horse equally fit and healthy and happy. And off you go. It's the ultimate slow travel in many ways, because you're literally going at clopping pace, which gives you the chance to enjoy these beautiful green open landscapes, and just sample a different way of life for a little while. An ancient way of life, which is largely totally faded from Ireland and the rest of Europe now. It's a lovely romantic notion, I think, and perfectly doable in the space of a few days.
Let's go from that small scale caravan, I was there with you as you were talking, to the sort of epic side of things. And we've got a map here which is within the book, which just shows us the absolute potential that there is to get around the world flightlessly. So I wonder whether you might just talk us through some of what you've entitled epic voyages.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that people start to ask themselves when thinking about how to travel without flying is how to cover long distances. Now, it's all very well covering long distances in your home continent by train or by electric car or by bike or whatever, if you've got the time, that's fine. But what happens when you get to an ocean? This is the challenge that that I hope this map helps people address a little, because it's not quite as daunting as they might imagine. Um, there are different ways of crossing oceans. Quite a lot of them involve a lot of time. Quite a lot of them involve a lot of expense. But so we have to be realistic about that. It's not for everybody. It's for those kind of people which have time on their hands, or have deliberately set aside time for something extraordinary. But it is doable. You can cross an ocean by sailing if you're a sailor, or if you're willing to crew, or if you're in a position to book a place on a trip, which is a sailing trip, a skippered trip. These go at and there are lots of different scales of these, right up to joining a skipper trip on a tall ship, you know, the biggest sailing vessel that you can imagine. Some of these are available to tourists. There's a really common run between the Canary Islands and the Caribbean, which is something that you can book as a straightforward holiday. And of course, you can get yourself to the Canary Islands by ferry. So that part of the journey is fairly easy. Just get yourself by train down to the southern part of Spain, hop on a ferry, get to the Canaries, and then there you are. You can from then launch yourself on a beautiful voyage across the Atlantic in a tall ship with the wind in the sails and no engine noise and all that starry skies above you at night time. It's a totally different way to cross the Atlantic compared to just jumping in an airplane.
And there's no expectation that you need to be hoisting the mainsail and all sorts of things like that. But actually, that is an expensive option, isn't it? That really is luxury.
Well, yes, for sure. Yes, you're looked after extremely well. These tall ship things, and there are ways of joining tall ship trips which are less expensive. They're more sort of hands-on. They're geared towards students and volunteers. But yeah, no. For most people, it's a matter of shelling out for a luxurious skippered tall ship holiday, which is like the loveliest ocean cruise, except, as I say, instead of being on a fuel powered ship, you're on this beautiful galleon.
I guess perhaps at the other end of the spectrum is a berth on a cargo ship. Which is also a possibility. And I don't know whether you're familiar, I'm sure you are familiar with that wonderful book by Horatio Clare called Down to the Sea in Ships, in which he does 2 epic journeys, and it won the Stanfords Dolman Prize actually 4 or 5 years ago. So if anybody's thinking of a cargo ship, I would definitely say that is worth a read. But within that, you get not only a sense of what the rest of the rhythm on the ship is, but actually that is not luxurious, is it?
No, it's not. But I'm dying to buy a cargo ship. I haven't done this yet, and I recommend it in the book. And I know that many people have tried it. I haven't yet. I can't wait. I really hope I get the opportunity, because, as you say, it's a unique way to cross between continents. It's definitely not cheap, but that's largely because it takes such a long time, and nor is it completely eco-friendly, because these ships are notorious for burning an awful lot of fossil fuel. But those that advocate traveling by cargo ship across oceans rather than flying across oceans would argue that, well, cargo ships are going anyway, and having passengers on board doesn't really make much difference at all to their carbon footprint. Whereas if fewer of us travel by plane, then the airline schedules will be adjusted accordingly. That's not going to be the case really with cargo ships. So effectively, you're kind of getting a free passage carbon footprint wines if you travel by cargo ship. But yes, the experience itself, it sounds really, really extraordinary. The sense of being alone in a huge expanse of water might seem daunting to some, but for me it's really exciting. I love the idea of being, you know, undistracted by the kind of distractions that cruise ships, the alternative, deliver. Instead of having all that stuff, you just have a few companions and very basic accommodation, comfortable but basic, and the chance to just spend time gazing out at the sea and the sky for several days at a time in order to cross a body of water. I find that really intriguing. There's something poetic about that kind of wilderness. You know, the ocean, the mid-ocean is one of the ultimate wilderness regions on our planet, and getting the chance to experience it hands-on like that's rare and special, I'd say.
Yeah, it appeals to me as well. That I mean, you'd have to have a lot of good books with you, wouldn't you, or somewhere, some tablet, in order to read them rather than carry them with you. In terms of wilderness, I guess the ultimate really is Antarctica, and you cover that in the book. Part of the appeal, obviously, there is the pristineness of that region, and that, I guess, brings me to the question of, should we really be going at all?
Oh, it's an excellent question. It really is, and there isn't a simple answer, but in my opinion, yes, we should be going there, because first of all, the way the tourism industry in Antarctica is organized, it's organized in such a way as to limit the impact of visitors as much as possible. There are really incredibly strict guidelines about the way tours are run, how many people can be in Antarctica on a tour at any one time, how many people can land at any one site at any one time, and under what circumstances, and what they can and can't do when they do. Which sounds all very sort of prescriptive and limiting, but in reality it's not. I mean, they're straightforward guidelines that any common sense driven person would be very happy to comply with. They're also incredibly careful to make sure that nobody brings in anything which might contaminate the environment. So this includes like obvious things like single-use plastic, but also less obvious things like any seeds which might be stuck in the Velcro of your clothing. The guidelines ensure that everybody examines every scrap of Velcro on their clothing before they land on an Antarctic site, so that you don't introduce any invasive plant species. So far so good. So tours are run pretty well. Now, so your question, I suppose, also asks, should there be tours at all? Well, I think they should, because the more people that go to Antarctica, the more people come back with a sort of renewed love for nature, a renewed inspiration for how beautiful our planet can be, how precious it is, how important it is that we do our very, very best in our normal lives to keep things pristine, to think really carefully about how to preserve our oceans, and also how to address climate change. And there are visible signs of climate change in Antarctica, as there are in the Arctic, and of course in all the vulnerable ocean nations of the world. And many other regions too. But it's particularly graphic, I suppose, when you're in Antarctica to see evidence of climate change. Things like the fact that there's more what they call coloured snow in Antarctica, the kind of snow algae which is caused by slight raising in temperatures, as far as we know. When I was in Antarctica, I saw glaciers calving. Now, I mean, this is a completely normal thing, but it just reminds one of those really, really profoundly disturbing videos that so many of us have seen of glaciers calving faster than they used to. And yeah, this is all good stuff to bear in mind, I think. Sometimes you have to see things firsthand to really comprehend and appreciate them, and both their beauty and significance, and also their fragility.
We're almost out of time, but I can't let you go without asking you for your ultimate round the world trip. I wonder whether you'd give us a whistle-stop route that will take us round the world and back home.
Whistle stop. I wouldn't be too whistly about it, I think. Taking time is the answer if you want to get all the way around the world without flying. You've got to be realistic and relax and really enjoy the journey, really enjoy the privilege of seeing so many different places on your way through to wherever the next destination is. But anyway, so I would say, first of all, allow plenty of time, a good 6 months. And as for which way you would go, I'm really, really drawn to the Trans-Siberian Railway. So I think I would start by heading across Europe to Moscow, jump on that crazy train and cross Russia all the way to Vladivostok, and from there I would hop on the ferry service, which takes you via Korea to Japan. Now, ever since I can remember, I've wanted to visit Japan, and the idea of getting all the way to Japan without flying, by crossing Europe and Russia, how extraordinary that would be. So that would be my next stop. Now, Japan, of course, is very well connected by shipping routes to China and also down to Southeast Asia and to Australia. Now, to avoid spending too much time on ships, I suppose from Japan I would head for China, and then jump onto the fantastically comprehensive Chinese rail network, and then head south to Southeast Asia, wiggle my way down through there. Then from there, once you've got down to the bottom of Southeast Asia, you probably have to hop on a cargo ship if you want to continue, say, to Australia. Australia has some quite busy cargo ports, obviously, so there's plenty of options there. And then once you've crossed Australia by land or by train, or by electric car perhaps, or by train, as I say, where next? I think from there, I would be really tempted to brave a cargo ship journey all the way across the Pacific to one of the South American ports. From there, it's that's quite a daunting prospect, but it's possible. And once you're in South America, well, I mean, I wouldn't want to hurry away from there. I'd probably do quite a bit of traveling around there by train or by public transport, by road, and then eventually, either, if there was time, go up into North America and ride around by train or by Greyhound for a little while. Or I would, if it was time to come home by then, I would find myself another ocean passage, perhaps an Atlantic cargo ship to head back across to Europe. And and by then I could probably smell the fish and chips, and I'd be desperate to get back to Brighton.
Fantastic, Emma. That's wonderful. I want to go right now. Let's go. We can't. We have to plan, and I have to say your book is absolutely marvelous for that. It's armchair travel with a view to positivity and lateral thinking and all of those things that we spoke about at the beginning. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thanks everybody, as I say, for being here. Emma's book is available at the Stanfords website. Do please go and buy it, look through it, dream, enjoy, and eventually go. Emma, thanks so much for being here, and we wish you well.
You're welcome. Thank you very much indeed.
I feel like I could almost hear Brighton's seagulls and smell the ocean. Thank you very much, Emma, and Julia as well. A wonderfully evocative list of destinations at the end there. I've long wanted to take a Greyhound, pretend it's the 50s, make friends with strangers, and really get behind the stars and stripes of rural America. Or sleep on a cargo ship. I mean, it feels terrifically Paddington Bear. Well, if you too have been inspired by Emma's talk of adventures by land, river and sea, there are 50 of them in the Flightless Traveller, available to buy at stanfords.co.uk.